He was the ghost in every government's machine, an invisible god of data with eyes in every city, mind wired into every system, and not a single fingerprint left behind. Ji-hoon Kwon, the South Korean tech billionaire who built Ecliptica, didn't just predict crime, he predicted you. And yet, the man who could see the future never saw her coming. She was the kind of woman who made time stop when she sang. Lanu Brielle Morrow, the sultry Singaporean jazz artist with smoke in her eyes and fire in her lungs, who could make a room of aristocrats weep with a single note. She didn't need fame, she was folklore. And when their worlds collided under violet lights at the Monte Carlo Jazz Festival, it sparked a romance so fierce, so consuming, it torched everything in its path. What began as a billionaire's fantasy unraveled into a fever dream of luxury, jealousy, and slow-brewing madness, ending not in heartbreak, but in one of the most chilling crime scenes ever documented. So what makes a man who controls the world kill the woman who controlled his heart? And what kind of love doesn't just end in death, but rewrites it? Before we descend into this haunting spiral of obsession, surveillance, and silence that still echoes through Monaco's bloodstained hills, go ahead and like this video, and subscribe for more true stories that prove love, power, and betrayal are always a fatal mix. This is the story of Ji-hoon and Lanu. And it doesn't end where you think it does. Before the blood, before the silence, before the headlines that shattered borders, there was music. There was code. And there were two people the world thought they knew. Ji-hoon Kwon was a man few had ever truly seen. The reclusive South Korean mastermind behind Ecliptica, the AI surveillance behemoth that quietly rewrote global policing. Ji-hoon wasn't just rich, he was untouchable. Governments didn't just want his technology, they depended on it. Ecliptica's satellites could track behavioral anomalies, predict social unrest, and flag threats before they ever formed thoughts. Cities, nations, even militaries signed over billions for the privilege of being watched. Yet for all the lives Ji-hoon could monitor, his own remained an encrypted fortress. No tabloid had ever caught him with a lover. He'd never been married, had no children, no public scandals, no speaking engagements, no social media. Even his board meetings were holographic. He wasn't famous. He was myth, a ghost wrapped in billions. And then came Lanu. Lanu Brielle Morrow was the kind of woman who didn't walk into rooms, she haunted them. Born in Singapore, raised in shadows, she sang not to be heard, but to bleed. Her voice was warm honey laced with ash, sultry, aching, almost too intimate. Her lyrics were gospel for the broken. Betrayal, longing, erotic shame, whispered rage. In Paris's underground jazz dens, she was legend. In Monaco, she needed no name. They called her simply Ji-hoon's muse. Their paths collided at the Monte Carlo Jazz Festival, under the kind of violet stage lights that make dreams feel like memories. She performed barefoot, spine curved like smoke, eyes closed as she breathed the pain into every note. Ji-hoon sat front row, beside the Prince of Monaco himself, and never blinked once. From that moment on, it was done. The algorithmic king had been infected with something raw, unpredictable, human. Within 4 weeks, she was gone from Paris. Flown by private jet to a villa carved into the cliffs of Ease, a residence so heavily secured it didn't even exist on GPS. Locals began to whisper about late-night arrivals, draped curtains, and the emerald necklace she wore once in town, rumored to be worth 16 million euros. But there were no tabloid leaks, no red carpet photos, no official confirmations, because this wasn't a celebrity affair. This wasn't love in the public eye. This was something darker, hungrier. A billionaire's descent into obsession, and a woman too spellbinding to escape it. From the outside, it looked like luxury. Inside, it was already becoming a labyrinth, one no one would leave unchanged or alive. The descent was subtle at first. At Ecliptica's global headquarters in Seoul, board members whispered behind biometric doors. Ji-hoon Kwon, the man who once orchestrated surveillance grids across 5 continents without missing a beat, had started vanishing, skipping encrypted briefings with NATO security heads, ignoring urgent calls from Geneva, refusing to authorize satellite recalibrations that once couldn't proceed without his fingerprint. His absence rippled through the highest corridors of power, but no one dared confront him. How do you question a man who built the world's digital nervous system? Meanwhile, Lagny disappeared from her own stage. No more underground shows in Paris. No whispered invites to jazz clubs in Montmartre. Her social media, already minimal, went black. Fans speculated she was working on an album, collaborating in secret. But the truth was buried deep within the limestone walls of Ji-hoon's villa, perched above the Mediterranean like a mausoleum waiting to be filled. Inside, the air grew thick. House staff, all bound by NDAs that could financially ruin generations, began quitting in quiet succession. Those who stayed behind spoke in hushed tones about nights of chaos, screaming that echoed through marble halls. Chandeliers shattered. Doors slammed hard enough to crack their frames. Blood on white silk pillowcases washed before dawn, never spoken of again. Lagny's voice, once the very sound of seduction and sorrow, now came only in muffled cries or, worse, not at all. Ji-hoon no longer left the villa. He spent days in the underground studio he built just for her, watching footage of her past performances over and over, slowing them down, memorizing every twitch of her lip, every falsetto curve. Staff once overheard him whispering through the speaker system, "Sing for me. Just one more time." But it was the death of Yael Kastner that shattered the illusion completely. Yael wasn't just a bodyguard. She was ex-Mossad. Tactical genius. Hardened. Loyal only to results. For 5 years, she managed Ji-hoon's security empire with militant precision. She didn't flinch. Didn't sleep. Didn't miss. And yet, 2 months into Ji-hoon's affair with Lagny, Yael resigned, effective immediately, without a word of explanation. 2 days later, she was found face down in a marble bathtub in her hotel suite in Nice. Water cold, wrist slit, eyes wide open. The French authorities called it suicide. But those who knew Yael knew better. She was methodical, controlled, unshakable. Something or someone had broken her. And in the world of men like Ji-hoon, no one breaks without reason. The air around the villa thickened into something unbreathable. The once dazzling love story between a tech titan and a jazz siren had curdled. Something unnatural was fermenting in the silence. Something cruel. Love had become surveillance. Music had become weaponized. And the house on the cliff had become a cage, echoing with the ghost of a voice that hadn't yet died, but was already being mourned. The call came in at 3:26 a.m., a whisper sliced by panic, soaked in disbelief. "There's a woman in the freezer," the man on the line said. "She's not breathing. I think it's Lagny. And he's talking to her like she's alive." Interpol traced the call to a restricted number linked to one Corvelius Vex Dandridge, a 47-year-old culinary prodigy from Louisiana, a man who once catered for French presidents and Hollywood royalty. Now, he was whispering into the void from the kitchen of a billionaire's seaside tomb, barely holding it together. His voice trembled like a man standing too close to something sacred or something monstrous. Within 2 hours, a black convoy carved its way up the serpent-like road to Ji-hoon's villa in Nice. Interpol agents arrived in silence. No sirens. No lights. They moved like ghosts through moonlight, guns drawn, breaths held. What they found inside was not a crime scene. It was a shrine. A horror installation only madness could have curated. The walk-in freezer had been converted into a tomb of ice and devotion. In the center sat Lagny Brielle-Morrow, not slumped, not hidden, but propped up on a custom-built lucite throne Ji-hoon had commissioned months earlier from a Berlin sculptor known for creating post-human art. Her body had been preserved with industrial silicone, her skin eerily lifelike under the dim, flickering LEDs embedded in the walls. A synthetic bridal gown clung to her frame, thousands of light-sensitive pearls glowing gently around her as if pulsing to a heartbeat she no longer had. But it was her face that stopped the agents cold. Her lips had been painted into a waxy smile. Not peaceful, not kind, just permanent. Artificial joy etched onto death. Her eyes, sealed shut, were framed with lashes still glistening with tear tracks that hadn't been wiped away, as if he wanted them there. All around the room, high-end surround sound speakers played a single track on loop, an unreleased a cappella. Her voice, raw, breaking, a haunting melody stitched together with lyrics that bled, "Don't leave me like the others." Over and over, she sang, as though warning them, as though she already knew she was singing from a grave. And there, at the kitchen table just 20 feet away, sat Ji-hoon Kwon, shirtless, barefoot, wearing only silk pajama bottoms stained with what appeared to be dried blood. A glass of Louis XIII cognac cradled in his hand. He wasn't crying. He wasn't panicked. He was humming, matching her pitch, rocking slightly as if the song lulled him to sleep. Agents froze, unsure if they were watching a man in the middle of psychosis or performance art. He looked up slowly, not startled by their weapons, not afraid. Just tired. "She said I was her only silence," he murmured, voice hoarse, like he hadn't spoken to a living soul in days. "I made her eternal." No one moved for 10 full seconds. Not until the music skipped and started again. "Don't leave me like the others." It was then the agents stepped forward, not as lawmen, but as witnesses to a tragedy that was already over. What happened in that villa wasn't a murder in the traditional sense. It was obsession brought to its final, grotesque crescendo. A love so consuming it demanded preservation, even if it meant silencing the song forever. She had been dead for nearly 6 days. The autopsy confirmed what investigators feared, but the details carried a darker signature than anticipated. Lanu Brielle Moreau, once the velvet voice of Parisian jazz and the private muse of a global surveillance emperor, had died slowly, painfully, and, worst of all, with intent stitched into every injury. The coroner's report read like a requiem for a soul dismantled. Internal hemorrhaging across her abdomen suggested sustained blunt force trauma, likely delivered in bursts, not a single fatal blow. Her jaw had been fractured, not cleanly, but as if someone had gripped it too tightly, too long. There were ligature marks around her neck, but not tight enough to indicate asphyxiation. Instead, they hinted at something more deliberate, restraint, as if she had been bound, not just physically, but emotionally, trapped in whatever nightmare Ji-hoon's obsession had constructed for her. But the most disturbing detail, the one that silenced the forensics team for a full minute, was what they discovered inside her throat. Her vocal cords had been surgically removed. Not torn, not slashed. Removed with precision, as if her killer hadn't just wanted her silenced, but preserved in silence. The incisions were methodical, calculated, almost reverent. It wasn't the work of rage. It was devotion turned pathological. The kind of madness that believes love isn't real unless it's irreversible. When Ji-hoon was confronted with the evidence, he didn't flinch, didn't deny. He simply stared at the lead interrogator like someone who had already buried their conscience in a marble crypt. "I couldn't let anyone else hear her," he said softly, almost wistfully. "Not live. Not even in memory." They pressed him for details, for motive, for some timeline that could make sense of the madness. But Ji-hoon Kwon didn't explain, he declared. "If I can't live in your song," he whispered, voice trembling with something eerily close to pride, "you don't deserve to have a voice." It wasn't just possession. It was ideology. In his mind, Lanyi's voice belonged to him the way a secret belongs to a vault. To him, her sound was the last thing pure in a world he'd spent a lifetime watching and manipulating through machines. And when she threatened to leave him, when she tried to escape the carefully curated prison of silk, candlelight, and cold control, he did the only thing a man like Ji-hoon Kwon could imagine. He silenced the music. He didn't see it as murder. He saw it as preservation. A grotesque final act of love from a man who had never understood the difference between devotion and domination, between intimacy and ownership. In the end, Ji-hoon didn't kill Lanyi because he hated her. He killed her because he couldn't share her. And in doing so, he turned a voice that once melted rooms into a silence that now haunts every room it's played in. They called it the trial of the century, but not even the most seasoned courtroom reporters were prepared for the storm that unfolded inside Monaco's Palais de Justice. the world's most reclusive tech magnate, Ji-hoon Kwon. Once dubbed the quiet king of global eyes, was now the centerpiece of a spectacle that combined genius, madness, wealth, and blood. The courtroom was packed with diplomats, legal scholars, and tech analysts flown in from Seoul, Washington, Berlin, and Tokyo. Yet there were no cameras. The judge had ruled swiftly and sternly, no visual recordings would be permitted. Still, the world devoured every charcoal sketch leaked by court artists. News anchors poured over each jagged line. Ji-hoon's slouched posture, the thin sheen of sweat on his temples, the hollow serenity in his eyes. In every drawing, he seemed detached, as though his body were present only in compliance, while his mind remained somewhere in the past, still sitting beside her frozen smile, still humming her melody. And indeed, he hummed. Lullabies in Korean, soft and unsettling, like a child rocking themselves to sleep in the middle of a fire. Whenever a prosecutor raised their voice, whenever a witness grew emotional, Ji-hoon would sit still and hum, Gokchi Marayo, Jang Nanian Ji and Nia, don't cry, it's not a game. The bailiffs warned him. He ignored them. The judge threatened sedation. Still, he hummed. But it was the evidence that brought silence. Over 3,000 pages of transcripts, photos, and satellite footage, all from Ji-hoon's personal archive. The same technology he had designed to detect threats, prevent war, and monitor corrupt regimes had been twisted inward and aimed solely at one woman, Lanyi Brielle Morrow. She had never known the full scope of it. Even when she felt watched, she couldn't have imagined the sheer scale. Ji-hoon's satellites didn't just monitor nations, they monitored her, walking barefoot through the rose garden in ease, crying in the bathtub at dawn, scribbling lyrics in her diary while chewing on the tip of her pen. Her silences, her stillness, her loneliness. Ji-hoon captured them all. The defense argued that surveillance didn't prove violence, that it was the act of a paranoid lover, not a murderer. But then came the audio. It wasn't entered lightly. The judge cleared the gallery of non-essentials. Even journalists had to sign NDAs. But someone leaked it anyway, and the world listened. The voice of Lanyi filled the courtroom, ragged, trembling, sharp with desperation. Not the sultry, haunting voice known from her recordings, but the raw voice of a woman unraveling. Ji-hoon, please. I can't breathe. I want to go. I want to go home. You said I was your silence, his voice replied calmly. There was the unmistakable sound of a slap. Then her sobs. You promised. You said you'd never hurt me. Then a chair scraping. Something metallic being dragged. Then silence. Exactly 27 seconds passed before his voice returned. Soft. Broken. Final. I warned you, Lanyi. The world doesn't deserve your voice. Those 7 words became the dark anthem of the trial. Newspapers ran the quote beneath pictures of her frozen body. Protesters spray-painted it outside tech conferences. Poets etched it into memorial murals from Seoul to New York. Ji-hoon never denied the recording. When asked if he regretted his actions, he said only this. She was drifting away. I anchored her. And in that moment, every person in that courtroom understood the depth of his delusion. This wasn't just obsession. It wasn't jealousy. Ji-hoon had built entire worlds through code and machines. But when faced with the messy, unpredictable pulse of human love, he did what he had always done. Seized control. Monitored. Contained. Neutralized. The prosecution closed with a simple truth. He watched the woman he claimed to love until there was nothing left of her but silence. The verdict would come weeks later. But the world already knew. He hadn't murdered Lanyi in a fit of rage. He murdered her because love, to him, was surveillance. And silence was safety. He was sentenced without spectacle. No grand monologue. No final act of remorse. Just a quiet ruling delivered in the marble hall of Monaco's criminal court. Life imprisonment in a high-security psychiatric facility in southeastern France. No chance of parole. No appeal. No possibility of fading into the world he once surveilled. Ji-hoon Kwon, once a man who controlled the eyes of nations, was now watched by men in white coats behind shatterproof glass. But he never lashed out, never cried, never defended himself. Throughout the trial, and even after, he remained eerily silent. His attorneys issued carefully worded statements about diminished capacity. Ji-hoon ignored them. He refused to testify, refused to apologize, refused to speak again. His final public communication came not from the witness stand, but from a napkin folded neatly on the tray of his court-appointed lunch. In thick graphite scrawl, he had written, "She still sings to me." And then he was gone. The world might have moved on. It tried to. But 6 months later, the dead found a way to whisper back. It started quietly, as all hauntings do. A cryptic thread appeared on a darknet forum frequented by audio engineers and glitch artists. Found something weird in the Monaco dump. Sounds like her. A few downloads. A few reposts. Then chaos. The leak consisted of 5 unfinished tracks, early, raw versions of what would have been Lanyu Moro's final EP. The files were scratchy. Some were clearly rehearsal tapes. Others were barely listenable, warped, filtered through static, layered with background noise like doors opening, a lighter flicking, someone coughing softly in the distance. But one track, track 4, marked only as DLM-5 Eternal Cut, was different. It started with her voice. That unmistakable, breathy alto. A few verses in, though, something happened. She paused. The recording seemed to stop. But then, the song continued. Not in her voice. Not entirely. It was his. Ji-hoon's voice, processed through the advanced mimicry layers of his AI empire, Ecliptica. He had trained the system not just on her studio recordings, but on private moments, conversations, murmurs in her sleep, fragments of vulnerability captured through cameras she never knew existed. The world to catch wind. The EP spread like wildfire. First on encrypted servers, then torrents, then bootleg vinyl pressings in Tokyo and Berlin. In less than a week, there were 40 million downloads. And that's when the stories began. People claimed their phones overheated while playing the track. Others said the melody looped in their heads for days, even when their devices were off. A 19-year-old girl in Oslo reportedly suffered a seizure while listening to DLM-5 on repeat. In Manila, a blogger claimed to dream of a woman with no face, just a wide, open mouth, humming softly at the foot of her bed. Spotify removed the files. YouTube banned every re-upload. But it was too late. The sound had found its home in the corners of the internet where memory never dies. Tech analysts called the phenomenon digital hysteria. Explained it away with mass suggestion, power of narrative, corrupted metadata. But a few neuroscientists weren't so quick to dismiss it. They noted the strange use of infrasound in the leaked files, frequencies below human hearing, known to cause unease, nausea, and disorientation. Someone, most likely Ji-hoon, had embedded subliminal triggers beneath the harmony. Still, nothing was conclusive. Just one question lingered in every mind. Did she know? An old interview resurfaced, filmed during a late-night Paris radio show in 2022. The host had asked Lanyi about her writing process, how she tapped into so much pain, so much eroticism in her lyrics. She smiled, leaned closer to the mic, and said something that had seemed like poetic nonsense at the time. When I sing, I don't feel like myself. I feel like I'm being possessed by someone I haven't met yet. The clip went viral in hindsight. Analysts dissected it frame by frame. Musicians slowed it down, trying to detect meaning in her pauses. Fans claimed her eyes flickered, like she knew something terrible was coming. But the dead don't clarify. And the only monument that remains is stone. In Monte Carlo, at the Place du Casino, where she once walked in bare feet, high on wine and applause, a statue was unveiled 6 months after the trial. No press release. No dedication. Just a 7-foot-tall bronze sculpture of a woman frozen mid-note. Her arms raised. Her mouth wide open in silent song. There is no plaque. No inscription. Only silence. And the faintest hum, if you stand close enough and listen with grief in your chest. Some swear you can still hear her. Some swear you never stopped. This wasn't just a love story gone wrong. It was something far more insidious. Something colder. A man revered as a technological prophet fell into the oldest curse known to man, obsession. But Ji-hoon Kwan didn't just want Lan Yu Brielle Moro's love. He didn't crave her companionship, her warmth, her presence in the ordinary sense. He wanted to possess what could never truly be held, her voice. That ache of a sound that made time falter and grown men weep. The voice that once filled rooms now filled a digital void, rewired, reanimated, repeated endlessly in the echo chamber of his madness. In the end, he didn't bury her. He preserved her like a relic, turned her final breath into data points, wrapped her silence in silicone. And when the world gasped at the horror, Ji-hoon hummed, as if nothing had changed, as if she were still there. This was no crime of passion. It was devotion metastasized into delusion. A man so powerful, he could stop wars with a server blink, yet so powerless when it came to her leaving. So he made her stay, in song, in circuits, in code. But the question that still claws at the edges of this story is darker than any autopsy report or court document. Was Lan Yi merely a victim, caught in the crosshairs of a controlling genius? Or had she, unknowingly or not, opened the door to something deeper? Something older than love, more ravenous than attention? Could anyone have saved her? Once her voice became his possession, once it stopped being hers, was there any turning back? It's tempting to see her as just another tragic muse, another woman devoured by the myth of genius. But the truth is, she knew her voice carried weight. She sang of betrayal. She bled erotica and pain into her lyrics like she was trying to exorcise something. In some ways, maybe she did feel it, that quiet, stalking algorithm weaving around her heart. Watching. Waiting. Now, all that's left is a melody that won't die. A duet no one asked for. A statue that doesn't speak, but somehow still sings. If this story shook you, if it clung to your thoughts like a lullaby you can't quite place, then don't look away. Like and subscribe for more disturbing true tales, where love, power, and madness don't just collide, they become indistinguishable.